Welcome to the AI and ML conversations with myself, Javor Botev. In this podcast, I talk to AI and ML experts about building real-world systems, working with humans and AIs, and exploring the future of our field. All right, hello. Welcome to the AI and ML conversations with myself, Javor Botev. Today I have a very special guest, Diogo, with whom we'll be talking about all AI and ML stuff. Very excited to have this conversation. Diogo, I'll let you introduce yourself maybe super quickly about, who you are, what you do, where you're based, and then we can just kick it off afterwards.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me for this podcast. I'm super excited to be here. So yeah, as you said, my name is Diogo, first and last name, as you can see probably here. I'm 29 years old. I'm Portuguese, but I actually live in Norway. I work as a senior data scientist at Usercentrics, which is this kind of content management platform market leader, especially in Europe. And I've worked mainly in marketing throughout all of my career for the past 7 years. And yeah, I think that I have something interesting to share about my employment and academic experience so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've taken a look at your background, and I think it's very interesting. Yeah, let's make. I'm curious on how did you decide to move to a PhD, and maybe I'll share a brief personal anecdote as well. When I was finishing my own master's studies, I was also considering doing a PhD. I can't remember if I ended up applying for one, but I surely considered doing it. But maybe one thing that put me off a little bit was the length of the program. 4 years seemed like
Kind of scary.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just kind of curious to hear your thought process behind it.
Yeah, so my bachelor was in management as well as my master's degree. It was a little bit because of my parents' influence, I would say, because they work in management, but not in a typical kind of management setting, I would say, but more that they manage different restaurants. So I've always had some insight into how family businesses are organized, and I really liked that kind of aspect. And I thought that maybe I would go into business just to know how I could potentially one day improve the business and maybe even take it as my own. But throughout my experience while in the bachelor degree, I thought that I was very split between finance and marketing, which are very different kind of worlds, I would say.
Yeah.
One that is extremely rational and the other that, while on the bachelor's degree, it was very fixated maybe on the creative side of marketing. And I've had my fair share of experiences in both of these universes. And I thought that maybe marketing would be the best fit because I really liked how marketing is disruptive and it's dynamic. It's always constantly changing. And I think that I would label myself ultimately as being a lifelong learner. So I really related with this field because of this. And by the end of the master degree, I thought that it wasn't really the right time to go into a PhD. I really wanted to have some industry experience. But in the back of my mind, I always had this thought of like, I think that I could really be tailored for this because unlike most people that I know, which hated doing the master thesis, I actually was very happy doing so and to have this time allocated to doing the master thesis. And the funny thing is that back then I was working on the impact of chatbots back in 2017. So it was, if I kept on pursuing it, maybe nowadays the conversation would be very different. So I started to go into industry experience, but really felt like I really wanted to have some more exposure to the academia. So I first started to do some lectures in university where then I've done some post graduation and I really reconnected, like the fire rekindled with the academia world. And I thought like, why not? I'm still young. I don't have a lot of responsibilities. I really like this world. And so I went for it.
Okay, cool. So, and then did you ended up doing all the PhD on its own, or did you also do some work while doing the PhD?
Second, yeah. So I'm still finishing the PT, so it's not finished. And I'm working full time, but since it's a setting in which I don't exactly need to be on a lab, I'm doing it remotely, both from Portugal and also doing some courses here in Norway. But yeah, it's not full time.
Okay, yeah, I see. Yeah, I guess that's a better way to do it. Otherwise, if you just did it full time, it would be a bit difficult to get this industry experience that you are now having for sure.
I think that some PhDs nowadays try to have this kind of element of industry, which I think that it's super important. But yeah, definitely not as much of an exposure as I do nowadays.
And what is the topic of a PhD?
Yeah, so the focus area is cultural economics, which is apparently very far off from a topic that you would assume one would be doing.
Interesting.
But I think that it has a lot of similarities to marketing, and I can try to make it brief. So in cultural
Mm-hmm.
economics, you can think of it, and the main thing that I'm trying to explore is measurement in cultural economics. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look into a museum, into a gallery, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they need to prove their worth. And usually the way that they do it nowadays is through a financial value. So, and financial value in this case means the ticket selling, right? But most of the times when you go to a museum, either you go for free on specific days, or if you are within a specific age range, you have some discount. So usually these kind of institutions or places, they are not meant to be profitable, and they need a lot of support from the state.
Yeah.
And so it comes into a question like, why should we keep on having these places when instead we could have, I don't know, an hotel, a restaurant,
Yeah.
something that it's like economically a little bit more profitable for the country, for the economy. And so the mission here is trying to prove that there is this concept of cultural value. And I try to make this parallelism between cultural value and brand equity in marketing, which is exactly the same thing, right? You are trying to prove something that doesn't really exist in real life. It's something that it's intangible, but there's still a necessity to build this so that, okay, I'm investing, for example, in marketing campaigns, and eventually over time, we are creating this thing that it's bigger than just standalone campaign. So I feel like this thing, which at the first sight is going to be super different from what I do, in reality, it's not. So most of the things that I'm doing on the PG has a lot of carryover to what I do at work as well.
Well, that sounds super interesting, and I have to admit I don't think I've come across the did you call it cultural economics or?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I haven't heard of this term before, but that's definitely a kind of a concept that I have thought of, throughout the years. How does the government, especially in the Netherlands where I lived in Amsterdam, the culture there is very important in the city and in the life of people. And I always wondered, how do governments decide to how much financing they should give to these cultural activities or galleries or theaters? It's interesting that you've been looking into this into a lot more detail. The connection that you made to brand value is also a pretty good one. How exactly are you developing your PhD? Have you done any quant analysis on data that's already pre-aggregated for you? Maybe a little bit about the technicalities of what you've
As
been
you
doing?
can imagine, these kind of institutions are not exactly data driven.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole challenge behind it, is that there's actually not much data available. One thing that I have is an API to connect with the
Mm-hmm.
ticket selling service. So that was the only thing that I had beforehand. And now the whole process is about finding these different indicators that might be eventually relevant to measure these things. So I'm thinking about, for example, there's some things that are a little bit more straightforward, like for example, the weather or on a specific day, or if it's a public holiday. But there's some other things that could potentially be handy, like if you have access to data from telecommunication companies and you see the amount of people that might be in the
Mm-hmm.
surroundings of a specific place, and then you see, okay, from this amount of people that were in the area, which were the amount of people that then actually went to the museum, and you think of it as some kind of conversion rate.
Yeah.
It's going to be something interesting. But yeah, I also wanted to do this mix between survey data so that we can get also this qualitative aspect into it, because it's super important on these fields, especially how experts, critics, and these other people have a lot of impacts on this concept of cultural value.
Mm-hmm.
And then also to try to measure the willingness to pay that people might have to go into these places. But yeah, there's different techniques that it's used. Surveys is one of them. Some other things that people use is this kind of economic impact studies, or you try to see something that is very tangible. It's when you create a cultural space, sometimes the house prices increase, right? So you see this spillover effect. Or even if you create this space, there's also going to be probably an impact on tourism that goes into that place.
Yeah.
So also in regards to these kind of reviews that people do online about this place are also going to be super interesting, and what is the sentiment that it's indexed to these perceptions that people have from these places. So NLP is
Yeah.
for sure something that it's very important in this regard as well.
Interesting. For your studies into the PhD and your let's say, the area of your research, is that something that you decided on your own, or Is it somehow influenced by a company that you've been working for?
It wasn't for sure something that came from my mind immediately. It was actually this organization that exists in Portugal called nowadays Lisbon Culture, Lisboa Cultura.
Mhm.
And they came to my university and challenged the different faculties into different topics. And my faculty in specific was on this topic of measurement.
Yeah.
And at first sight, it wasn't something that I was super knowledgeable about. So I was a little bit skeptical about how I could improve on this area. But over time, I
Mhm.
really felt like I had some passion towards this topic because I am also somebody that really likes to go into these spaces. And it was also, as you were saying,
Mhm.
something that was always in the back of my mind, even though I never took the time to actually to investigate
Yeah.
how come these things happen. But yeah, nowadays I really like the field.
Mhm.
Yeah, it wasn't from me, but I'm glad
Yeah, yeah,
that it was.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's also, I think, one way to make academia and just universities more, maybe more practical, is to have companies coming up with interesting topics to investigate.
Mhm.
I remember when I was doing my master thesis, I was actually looking for companies to do it in the Netherlands, and yeah, I ended up doing it in a asset management firm where I was doing a kind of research into which financial assets can be used to invest more profitably. I was a little bit surprised by how in industry, the effort on research and just the time and money that you put into research is not so much, generally speaking. And I feel like more collaboration between industry and academia is definitely a good thing to do. But yeah, that was, I guess, a little bit of a side note. So maybe one thing that I'm kind of curious is how did you decide to move out of Portugal to your next location? What was the story there?
Yeah, I could say that it was because of this, but now I think that it's the stereotypical your partner finds a job in some other country and then
Ah,
you go
yeah.
alongside because actually my company doesn't operate in Norway. So I'm employed
Mhm.
through this thing that is called an employee of record.
Oh, yeah. Same
I'm
here.
actually the only person that belongs to this company that lives in Norway.
Mhm.
But the company is mostly distributed in Germany, in Denmark, and also in Portugal and in Czechia.
Yeah.
But it's actually funny because I'm like a Portuguese guy in Norway and I have this counterpart in marketing, which is a Norwegian girl living in Portugal. So it's very funny.
That is pretty funny. Yeah. That is funny. Yeah. And did you, I see that you spent some time in Austria as well, right? Vienna.
Yeah, it was also some remote setting for the company. So it's
Mhm.
also a company that would give us the opportunity to go to the country every now and then for these office weeks that they would promote. And I think it was my very first introduction to how is it like to work remotely. And it was super interesting for me because sometimes in Portugal there's not a lot of good opportunities, unlike this one
Mhm.
that I have right now. But back
Mhm.
then, and it was also the perfect role for me. Yeah.
Okay. And maybe to go on a side tangent a bit, what do you think about working remotely versus working in the office? What is your personal preference? What do you think companies should be doing, should be promoting?
Yeah, I think that nowadays this whole thing about working remotely is starting to disappear a bit. It's getting a little bit harder to find these remote
Mhm.
companies. But for me, it's the perfect setting. I mean, I'm in a place, especially at this age, maybe later on, I might change my opinion on it since I don't have also any children at the moment.
Mhm.
But without having these responsibilities that go beyond myself, right? I really like this setting. It gives me the freedom to be wherever I want, whenever I want,
Mhm.
under, of course, some circumstances. But I really think that the best thing for me is having this possibility to be where I want, but still that the company makes some kind of incentive to also to go to the office. I do really like to go to the office as well.
Mhm.
But I don't like the idea of being forced to go to the office like a
Yeah.
next set of days. Like, for example, some companies have done some difficulties because they force these people to go to the office, but maybe the office doesn't have any more the capacity of these
Yeah.
people. So you go there, you don't really have a desk to work on. So I think that it's also not productive
Mhm.
most of the times. And when I'm at home, I can do some other stuff. And I believe that I'm extremely efficient because I have my proper setting, like my laptop, my monitor. know that things are going to be working. Usually you also don't have an assigned seat for you, so it's always rotating. So maybe there's going to be some technical difficulties or whatever can happen. So I think that companies should really adapt to this new standard. But I think that some countries are a little bit more advanced, I would say, in this regard, but others, unfortunately, not so much. But yeah, this is my opinion.
Did you say countries or companies?
Countries, I would say, like, for example, in Portugal, it's not that easy to find this kind of setting.
Oh, interesting.
But probably if you go to some other country, like, I don't know, maybe Austria or even in Germany, maybe it's going to be a little bit easier to find these kind of companies. But in Portugal, there's a lot of focus on the social component of being at the office and like having these kind of impromptu meetings of people that you find in the hallway, and you're like, now that I saw you, I remember that maybe it's relevant to share with you the progress of this project, blah blah blah. So it's a little bit more um a little bit less
Yeah,
carefree, I
but
would say. Sometimes the
yeah.
conversation.
That's very interesting to hear because myself, I've been working in different countries in Europe with colleagues from all kinds of European and of course global countries. But yeah, like I haven't in most countries. I would say what I've seen is people are mostly fine with working remotely.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's interesting to hear. In Bulgaria, where I'm based right now, there are a lot of positions that offer pretty much remote work. There's still more, um, I would say, traditionally minded companies, even software companies, which prefer you to be in the office. Sometimes I think their goal is to make sure that you're doing your job essentially, a little bit like micromanagement, which I
Mm-hmm.
see as an anti-pattern. In my mind, as long as you are delivering on what you should be delivering, you should be kind of left to do whatever works for you. It's interesting to hear that in Portugal, it's the social vibe that is important.
For
I,
sure, yeah.
yeah. And I know Portugal used to be a very popular place for expats and for digital nomads and the like. Is it still the case?
I wouldn't say that that's kind of the issue that I see is that they are not working for Portuguese companies, but rather that they find this remote setting, like, for example, Americans that keep on working for American companies, but then they move to Portugal and then they have a much better wage compared to what Portuguese people earn. And then it comes with its own fair share of issues in which the housing situation is chaotic.
Yeah.
So I think that back then, I keep on saying this to a lot of different friends that I find, which is like back then, like early 2000s, maybe even early 2010s, you wouldn't hear a lot about Portugal, but then there was this shift. I don't know exactly what happened, but Portugal became a little bit too trendy.
Yeah.
And now whenever I hear like anything related to Portugal in English, I kind of cringe a bit. I'm like, "Ugh, it's going to bring more people to my country." Which
Yeah.
of course we are a country that if you look at it, like tourism is a big part of the economy. But then there's this kind of situation which is a bit unfair towards the people that live there that don't have the same access to the same things just because we are favoring sometimes these expats.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that's one of the negative externalities on having a more integrated European and global market where people can freely move around and then work for high-paying foreign companies. Yeah, I was actually in Porto last September, and I was surprised by how many tourists were there. Like it was, the city center was packed with people. I remember that the airport it's not a huge airport, and there were like tons of people there. The lines were crazy, so I was a little bit surprised to see
Yeah.
how popular the country is.
Yeah, nowadays it's super trendy, but and I hope that you liked your stay in Porto.
Yeah, no, I really love Portugal. I've been there several times.
Glad to hear.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Right. So maybe something else I wanted to chat to you about is your more technical experience in companies. Like one thing that I've noticed in my experience is that oftentimes companies want, kind of a quick solutions as far as data science and machine learning go. And if you want to make a good machine learning model, you have to spend more time cleaning your data, making sure that some small things are correctly tuned so that there is no bias in your predictions. So can you chat about your experience, how difficult or easy it is to create working data science solutions in companies?
Yeah. So I have a strong opinion about this because I think that it makes sense because if you look at it, you are like a stakeholder that try to hire data scientists that want to some extent to improve something business wise. And then you go to them and it's like, okay, I can do this, but it is going to take, I don't know, 6 months to deliver like the end product because it needs to be deployed. I need to make sure that the data has been released, and it takes a very long time because then you deploy it, but then you also don't see immediately the impact, right? You need to take some time. So for example, if you are going to be doing something that moves a specific cohort, then you need to see the cohort over time, and especially if you look into industries or to verticals like to B2B that has a long purchasing cycle. You can think of it as like, okay, I'm going to be deploying this project in 6 months, which is only going to have results in the next year, right? So for the stakeholder point of view, this is insane to hear about this. And I think that it's something that as time goes, you need to kind of to learn how to navigate the conversation with stakeholders. And I think that the standpoint is that you always need to make the easiest thing that it's going to have some measure of impact just to work as a proof of concept for what you aim to achieve ultimately. We are doing a project exactly like this. So the end product would be to have a way. So for us, we work a lot with different advertising platforms. And then we invest some money and you want to have some leads, which ultimately are going to subscribe to our product. And at the moment, what we are doing is that, okay, we are going to be investing money to get a lead, but we don't know what is going to be the value of this lead. We have no way to know. So we just want something, as long as it's within this boundary, this is going to be our cost of acquisition that we are comfortable spending money on. And the thing that would make the most sense is, okay, we are going to be building this thing that it's going to be super sophisticated, that incorporates lifetime value, probabilistic lifetime value, into it, that it's going to be having this data, all of this connected. It's going to be super real time. So whenever somebody converts, instead of having like the plan that they subscribe to, we are going to be inferring based on behavioral data and whatever they do on website and so on. That we incorporate this to build this lifetime value. But since this is going to take so long, maybe we can start with just a fair set of data points, which can already lead us to make some conclusions out of it. Sometimes it's as easy as creating some value rule, like, okay, this person is signing up with a public email instead of being a business email, so probably the value is not going to be as good, or something that they mention on the onboarding survey. So there's these kind of little hints for which you can probably build a model, which you would then say that it's typically a machine learning model. You can use machine learning to infer which would be the rules to understand which is the most valuable customer. And then you prove that this is something that it's valuable. And over time, you keep on improving on top of it until you reach what would be the desired end state. Maybe it's going to delay a little bit more this end product, but you can kind of create these alongside the stakeholders, and that they also feel included, and that they can see that there's something that is going on, and that you are not like just like being like this and not doing anything. And they are like, okay, what's the progress? And you just keep on saying, oh, I'm refining the data quality. And for them, that's Chinese, right? They have no idea what you are talking about. So I think that the key to success in business is really to build this proof of concept, and then you iterate on top of it.
Yeah, that's actually a great advice. And I'm also surprised by how many people or companies are not really following this. I remember in some of my previous roles, we were probably building model for 6 months without having it being deployed and actually generating value to our business stakeholders and the company. And nowadays, I follow your way of thinking in trying to deploy a service or a model as quickly as possible, even if it's not perfect, and iterating on it while it's working in production. Have you had experiences working with, let's say, statistically savvy stakeholders versus not statistically savvy stakeholders? Do you think it's difficult to explain your data science approaches to business people who don't know so much about the technicalities behind this?
Yes, I would say that I've never had the chance to work with a stakeholder which has some kind of background that it's a lot on statistics. But I think that I've had stakeholders which are very willing to learn. And I think that in marketing, you either learn these kinds of things or you can't really thrive on your career progression. About managing these different stakeholders that don't have a background in statistics, in computer science, I think that the thing is that you really need to include them in the process, so that when you are building these deliverables of what is going to be these proof of concepts, that you kind of have their opinion on it. And also that's also something that I think that it's super relevant, is that you never say, I'm going to be deploying, I don't know, this neural network model, which is going to have this impact, but rather that you always say on the lens of how it is going to be affecting the business. Like I'm going to be improving this functional aspect of the business in X%. And then the way to do it is going to be through this, but you always start the conversation business-wise. So I think that the key is that you don't actually need to have a stakeholder which is very technical, but rather I think that data scientists need to be way more business driven than they are. I think that we shouldn't expect that people that are doing functions that are not at all related to statistics that have a deep knowledge about it, but rather that we are backed up by technical mentors or by your managers, which are going to have these technical capabilities, and then they are going to have their fair share of opinions about how to improve your models or on how to approach deployment and this kind of stuff. But for the stakeholders, I really think that um, I keep on saying, so we are going to be onboarding this new person fairly soon. And I was thinking about, for example, job shadowing would be something that is super important so that you know what are the pain points of these people and that you can understand what might be some opportunities through data science. You can eventually improve whatever pain points that maybe explicitly or implicitly they might be referring to. So yeah, I think that there's really this big disconnect. Even in my previous experiences, I've been hearing a lot about people that, for example, build forecasting models that are super granular, but then the business people can't even work on it. Like it's so granular. What is the use case for this? It's irrelevant. So I think that okay, you might have the biggest ambition and with intention, but then maybe you're not doing anything that is of value for the company.
It's a good tip. I tend to be a little bit more technical and too much into the, let's say, technicalities on how to slightly improve a certain forecasting metric. But in the end, 99 times out of 100, and a stakeholder doesn't care about this. Yeah.
Going to care if you not translate it into some kind of business metric, but it's like this difficulty of you really need to improve the way to, okay, I really want to speak in this jargon that it's super technical, but let me try to not say anything and just be focused on business metrics. And then they're going to be like, okay, then I see what you mean. Maybe this incrementality is going to be super important. Yeah, I'm on your side. I support that. I'm going to be your sponsor for that project.
Yeah. And how about working with engineers? How much of the data science thing are you used to doing, and how much would be done by technical engineers?
Yeah. So there's this project that I'm working on, which has to do with large language models. And I think that sometimes there's also this kind of, let's say, how can I explain it? Maybe it's that the definition of what a data scientist does is still a little bit unclear, where it's like, where does the end of a data scientist ends and then starts the work of a data engineer or a software developer, or even do we need to hire a machine learning engineer, which is going to be very focused on this kind of deployment of models, or even an AI engineer. So I think that in most of the organizations that I've worked on, it was the case that it was data scientists would be the umbrella for most of these things. Like in my previous job, I would be doing data engineering alongside data analysts and alongside data scientists, managing projects and so on, talking with C-level directly. I think that especially as you work in startups, which is my case, maybe in other bigger organizations, it's going to be a very different reality. But in my case, in these companies with about 300-ish employees, it's the case in which you need to stretch a little bit what you expect to be your definition and your job responsibilities. But yeah, in the ideal world, you would have these people that are super specialized in these different things. But my advice would be if you are going to be working on a startup, be willing to do things that you are probably not expecting to do initially and to be learning as it goes.
Yeah.
Especially this part about AI engineering has been super interesting for me, but at first sight, probably it wouldn't be something that I would be super interested in. But now I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to work on it.
Nice. Interesting. So there are a couple of things that caught my attention. First is that your current company has around 300 people. Even at this size, you're saying that you, as a employee, you'd have to probably do more than what your job description says, and you have to learn things around this.
I think it really depends on how the business is driven. Like my company was for the longest time driven by salespeople. So it's like the merger of two different companies. So one would be very driven by sales and the other would be very driven by product. So product-led growth. but it was never data science that would be the vehicle that will drive the change. But now they've seen that, okay, now we really need to improve on this regard to make the business be a little bit more sophisticated and to keep the market being market leaders.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's this perception. Maybe if it was something that from the very beginning it was always included in it, maybe the 300-ish situation would be very different in regards to the way that the data team is distributed in competencies. But for the longest time, it has been a lot of focus just on data engineering and data analysis.
I'm also always curious about the ceremonies and like the ways of working of different teams. So, and also what people think works and what doesn't. I know people in general complain about having a lot of meetings, but sometimes you could end up in a situation where there are almost no meetings and then there is very little communication between the different employees, which is also an anti-pattern.
Yeah, so I worked for some time as this kind of data consultant in which Agile was pretty much the reality and having these daily stand-ups and weeklies and whatnot. And for me, I don't see the value in them. Especially if you work as a data scientist, I think that it would be super repetitive. Like I'm working on data quality, I'm working on data quality again. And I found this bug and then, okay, let's do it again. So for me, it wasn't the perfect model, but the model that I've implemented in this company, which I would say a fair share of freedom. And something that I think that it's important to mention is that I work in this kind of matrix organization style. So I work
What is
on
that?
the data department, but then I have a dotted line to the marketing department. So I have a direct manager, but then I have like a functional manager.
Yes.
And so in regards to this, I don't think that even this daily stand-up would make sense for either of these teams. And what I've decided to do is that every time that I have a project which is significant enough, I create bi-weeklies to distribute the knowledge and the progress on this alongside the stakeholders so that they can see that there is some improvement on these projects and I keep some kind of accountability because it's not about saying, okay, I've done this. I'm going to say I've done this and the next steps are going to be this in this specific ETA. So that I just have also something to work towards on and that I don't also become too relaxed on this and that I can also have their opinion on the project as it goes.
Yeah.
For example, on the large language model, this project is a little bit about customer data enrichment. And so as we moved on, it was initially just about one or two dimensions that we would like to have more information about. But then as it went, it's like, okay, maybe this parameter, which we thought that it would be super relevant later on for customer segmentation and to have better first party data, maybe it's not going to be as great as this other one. So it was through this sharing of how the project was looking like that then we kind of brainstormed that maybe we have this other variable. It was even more interesting. So for me, these more mainstream ceremonies don't make a lot of sense. But I would say that I'm very much an adept of bi-weeklies.
Okay.
Per
And
project.
did you say that you're kind of writing these updates yourself rather than having a meeting to talk about them?
It depends. So on this meeting, I usually create just a PowerPoint with this the status update on the project, but sometimes there's these side threads that we have, like on Slack. I'm sure that you also might have something similar-ish. And sometimes in there, it's a little bit more of a written communication, especially if it's like a C-level that wants some information. They are not going to have 30 minutes of my time just to learn about this project, but like a very specific and concise message, it's going to be enough for them.
That's good. What I've seen is people have difficulty sticking to the schedule and being disciplined enough to give these written updates regularly, unless that's demanded by the company and this is an established process.
Yeah, I think that it works very well for me because I had the same issue, especially with the PhD. If you think about it, you have a lot of freedom. You don't have any specific deadline most of the times. You just know that eventually you want to finish the PhD. So what really works for me is to have this kind of social accountability that it's not even
Interesting.
that it's not like demanded by my supervisor, but rather I say like, okay, by the next meeting in 1 month, I'm going to have this, and that, so that on the next meeting, they're like, oh, so did you do this that you've proposed to do? And I'm like, yes, damn it, I forgot about this. Usually it's the first. And the same thing for work. So usually, especially on this communication with C-level, I tend to always say, okay, this is the status update, and then the next steps are going to be this, just like one very short sentence and with an ETA for each of these things.
That's something which is in practice very simple to do, and very valuable, I think. So yeah, that's a very good tip. So we mentioned several times about LLMs and AI, but before this, I wanted to ask also about kind of your technical toolbox. What sort of IDs you use, or what kind of data engineering software or frameworks you use?
Yeah, so for programming, I usually keep with Visual Studio Code. I think that
Mm-hmm.
just works. I think that it's
Yeah.
great for me. I really like the different extensions that they have available, and I just keep on looking for these different extensions to make it even more productive. Especially now that you have also the GitHub Copilot, it's like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
For SQL, I tend to use dbeaver. I'm not sure if you know about it,
Yeah.
but it's like
Yeah.
I think that it's super interesting. And then for data engineering, so I'm not a data engineer, so I don't usually nowadays use much about it, but usually work with the star schema, but it's just like imposed
Mm-hmm.
by the data department. I'm not sure
Yeah.
why I decided to do it instead of like, for example, the medallion structure,
Yeah.
or the different other kinds of settings. But we are also possibly in the process of changing the way that we've structured our databases, which I think that they are a little bit confusing right now.
Yeah.
um, which I think that it's a big pain point for a lot of organizations. So how do you make sure that the data that you have available, not only on the data visualization software that you use, the stakeholders understand what the different dimensions and metrics means, but also as a person that is going to be working with these databases, that you know where to look for the information and how they are connected. And I think that it's a very real pain point in my organization at the moment. It takes sometimes forever to get the most simple thing that you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the time spent by data scientists and machine learning engineers trying to understand exactly what's in this column and what it represents is it's too much, and it should be
Exactly.
it should be something has to be improved in this
Yeah.
area. I also wanted to ask you about the you mentioned a couple of times about A/B testing and lifetime value. Are there any kind of established tools or frameworks or something that is used and maybe that you have used?
I wouldn't say that there is an established tool. I think that it's something that nowadays in the marketing science, if we may call
Hmm.
it like that, where it's getting a little bit more traction towards this framework that they call sometimes the trifecta,
Okay.
which is this combination between using attribution. So it's these deterministic models in which you can see the customer journey, and then you
Hmm.
attribute the conversion based on a specific algorithm. May it be just very basic things like last touch attribution, or might be more complex like Markov chain
Hmm.
model. And then you use these data points, which nowadays, if you look into the data that we have, we are getting less and less data, especially because of these consent management platforms, which if you
Hmm.
reject the consent, if you don't give the consent, I mean,
Yeah.
to these consent management platforms, then we can have as much data, and even the journey, if you look at it, it's going to be a little bit more confusing. So if you are going to purchase something, you are on the computer, then you go to a mobile phone, and then you go back and forth into it, and then it takes a very long time for you to purchase something. So what is also done in combination to attribution is incrementality experiments. Um, which may have different forms, but the most used one is geo experiment,
Hmm.
which is a quasi experiment setting in which you try to, for example, activate a campaign in a specific region and you do not activate in another region based on it being like similar distributions of demographics, and also that you have a fairly similar share of sales or fleets in these spaces. And the third thing that it's used is called marketing mix modeling.
Oh, I
Marketing mix
remember.
modeling.
Yeah, that brings a bell from when I was studying marketing courses in university, but that's about it. Yeah, sorry for interrupting.
No, of course. So this thing is exactly kind of an older approach that has, if I'm not mistaken, been developed either by Unilever or by Procter and Gamble, one of these two. And it has really gained some traction because due exactly to this problem of having less data about your customers, you need to have a better macro level view of how your different channels are performing. So I think that it's very interesting because it can get super sophisticated because you don't not only include like how much spend you have in the specific platform, but you also can
Yeah.
add these different dimensions that might have also some impact. Like for example, my previous company, something that I really wanted to test on. So my previous company, so a context. It was a refurbished marketplace in which it was very dominated by selling, especially of Mac product of Apple products, the iPhone. And so whenever we would have these Apple keynotes, we would notice a change in behavior. So I thought that including these Apple keynote data, some kind of binary variable would be cool to include into the model. And it was, in fact, something that was relevant to include in the model. So these things that maybe might not be obvious at first sight if you don't have this business knowledge as well. So tying back to what I've said before, this communication with stakeholders is super important. But yeah, I would say that this trifecta of attribution, incrementality experiments, and multi-mix modeling is going to be the normal thing to adopt as time goes on, but it's like in this transition stage at the moment.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You've mentioned also a couple of times about using LLMs and Gen AI as part of your work. What is your experience there?
Yeah, so for the moment, we are rather using already the foundational models and then deploying them and using RAG. So augmenting the context that they have with the information that we have about the customer. So in this case, it's more about fetching publicly available information like the content that you have on your websites to then to infer, for example, what is going to be your industry or what is going to be, I don't know, the number of employees that this company has, feeding
Yeah.
this information into the model and then trying to get something out of it that it's then useful for segmentation. But yeah, it has been this kind of learning curve because you need to learn what is going to be the best model for these kind of things, how you are going to make sure that once you deploy these models and how you deploy these models, how you are going to make sure that in the long term that the metrics that you evaluate them keep on being stable or if there's going to be some kind of drifts
Yeah.
on them. But yeah, I think that's my technical expertise is rather on causal inference. And then I was doing this project, which is so far off from what I'm used to
Yeah.
working on. But it was super interesting to having been working on this.
Maybe one question on this. So I think nowadays a lot of companies don't deploy foundational or even fine-tuned LLMs on their own, but rather they just call external APIs. And the same goes for RAC databases. Like it's very cumbersome to set it up on your own. Is this what this project has also done that you mentioned?
Yeah, so you go, for example, to these different platforms like Vertex AI or to Azure
Yeah.
Machine Learning, Azure Foundry, I think that it's now called.
Yeah.
And then you just select whatever foundational model that you want to deploy it. But yeah, I'm still deploying it. I'm not using directly an API from OpenAI. So I think that it's more of the alternative scenario.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
It was just, in our case, it was privacy is, of course, something that it's very important for us. So we really wanted to make sure that all of the things that we feed into these models that are also on our side.
Yeah, that's another very interesting point. And I think companies have kind of different, let's say, sensitivity to privacy because very often times the providers of the LLMs and the APIs, they say that they don't use your data for any training purposes, but you could be a little bit more skeptical and more risk averse and just not send them the data,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
yeah, which is probably the prudent thing to do.
Yeah, for us, it would be very bad, especially working on this landscape. We really need to be
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. Okay, I think I have maybe one last question for you. So I was wondering, in your experience as in the data science field, is there any advice that you can give to data scientists or people who want to start working as a data scientist? One thing that we've talked about a couple of times is whenever you're communicating with your business stakeholders, to always make it clear what business metric you're kind of touching and trying to improve rather than focusing on the technicalities of what you're doing. But do you have maybe other kind of useful tips for somebody working in the industry or wanting to come into the industry?
Yeah, I think that it's very tied to that. I would say that especially building rapport with the stakeholders, it's super important. Don't just be like a fly on the wall that just delivers things now and then, and really try to be very close to them. I think that's also the way that you grow very fast in an organization, is that you really understand the pain points, you understand how you can improve what they are doing, and they are for sure going to be sponsoring whatever you want, as long as you can understand how to improve their work. And you can only know this if you are very close to them. So I think it would be my main advice.
Okay, building rapport with your stakeholders. Yeah, that's actually, again, something that not too many people do.
Definitely something that you need to be a little bit more proactive, or you need to be actively be working toward this, especially if you are a little bit more introverted. But I think that it really goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's actually a really nice spot where we can wrap up our podcast conversation. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was great to have you here.
That was a pleasure, Javor. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for listening to the AI and ML conversations with myself, Javor Botev. If you want to support the show, please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. In addition, please follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple and share it with the people you know. Thank you.